everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today I'll be doing a little bit of a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, looking specifically at The Suicide Squad, which is the reboot slash sequel slash who knows what the heck it is for the 2016 film Suicide Squad. Yeah. Let those names confuse you for a second, but before going any further, please make sure that you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live onto the channel. So, The Suicide Squad is set to come out this weekend. In fact, it's coming out today. It's already live on HBO Max. I have not had a chance to see it yet. And it's a movie that I'm very much torn on because I did not like the 2016 Suicide Squad really at all. I thought it was just really stupid. The only positive thing I can say about the film is that finally, Jai Courtney found his niche. He finally found a film and a role that he could actually exceed in, whereas everything else I'd ever seen him in, he was just not good, or the movie was terrible. And even though the movie 2016 Suicide Squad is not good, the fact that he was the shining moment and the shining light of that film, I think, is something that is worth noting. But The Suicide Squad is looking kind of more of the same, at least for me. It's obviously going to take a different direction because it has the direction and writing of James Gunn, who has done Guardians of the Galaxy. But also, that is something that I've heard from some hardcore DCEU fans, including Snyderverse fans, who are being critical. We've already actually been able to see this film. A great example is if you check out Lethal Lightning, who is awesome, by the way. Shout out Lethal Lightning. He says this is one of the worst films that he has ever seen. And this guy is a hardcore Snyderverse fan, hardcore release the Snyder Cut, hardcore release the Ayer Cut person. And so he is very much someone that this film would seemingly be made for. And yet one of the biggest issues that he had with the movie was that there are apparently a lot of MCU-esque type jokes that just really feel out of place in the film and within the context of the film, seeing that the Suicide Squad is supposed to be a little bit more darker and a little bit more serious, and how it almost feels out of place. And so I found that interesting because you also have RK Outpost, Ryan, shout out to RK Outpost, who is talking about how when he saw this movie, he thought it was really good. He thought that it was very enjoyable. It was miles better than the 2016 Suicide Squad film, and that he had a lot of fun with it. So it's interesting that you have two people who I would call very similar as far as their mindset of the DCEU films, much more positive than someone like me who thinks that almost all of them are trash. To have them have very differing opinions on this movie, I think kind of shows that this film is not going to be a unifier. This movie is not going to be able to, I think, bring fans at least together, and it's not going to bring a lot of people together at the box office either. And so let's go ahead and look into these numbers. As you can see, The Suicide Squad right now is projected. These are the final projections that they do, usually Thursday evening into Friday morning, once they have an idea of how well the Thursday tickets went. And I believe that the way that it works is that they have a projection for what they think the Thursday opening night numbers will be. They see what the reported numbers are, and then whatever the percentage is that it's off, they can then have their final prediction for the weekend based on that percentage. And so this is actually a really, really bad number. And I know that some people might look at it and say, oh, but this is a really strong number for a movie during pandemic times. You got to keep in mind that there are budgets at play, which, by the way, we finally have a budget that we can talk about for this movie, but also just how off this is from what the original projection was for the movie. So let's go ahead and look at the number right now. It says the Suicide Squad is projected to make $28 million. $28 million domestically. That is not a very strong number. $28 million domestically for a film that, yeah, that's right, cost $185 million to make. So that's not accounting for marketing. That's not accounting for any ancillary cost either. So this is a movie that's costing close to $250 to $300 million when you add all of those things together, and it is projected to make in its opening weekend domestically $28 million. Now, some of you might be saying, yeah, but it's going to do really well overseas. And hey, it very well could. But then you have to take into account things like the fact that there are governments across the country and across the world that are terrified of the new variants and are trying to shut things down again. And obviously there's a lot of people protesting these things as well. All of these things that would come together to say that European markets are probably not going to show up in as much of a powerful force as they potentially could in other times in other parts of the year, or in other years in history without pandemics. But also, too, the people even domestically who are more apt to go see this movie really don't seem to be going to go see it as well. And obviously that, brings into the discussion the HBO Max cut, the fact that it's going to be available for free for HBO Max subscribers, myself included. And to be honest, I don't really want to go out to a theater to go see this movie because there's nothing that really is in the trailer or nothing in the history of the DCEU that makes me that excited for it. And I'm someone that's a big proponent of theaters, but you all know I'm very, very critical when it comes to the DCEU. And so this is a film that I would have no problem just watching at home in the comfort of my own chair on HBO Max. And I would not be surprised if a lot of other people feel the same way who actually have HBO Max. But because they're not doing the crazy $30 for a movie like Disney is doing with Disney Plus and their premium and premier access, you're realizing that the amount of money that they could potentially make from subscriptions is not going to be enough to be able to justify the amount of money that they've spent on this film and what is likely going to be the very small amount of return on the investment that they get. In fact, I think it's going to be a financial loss. And the reason why I think that is because this was the last long-range box office projection for the movie. It was projected to make between $35 and $60 million in its opening weekend domestically, making in total $75 to $150 million worldwide. $75 to $150 million total in the domestic marketplace. That number right there, $35 to $60 million. Normally, in a film like this, and the way that the box office projections work, is normally when you get to the opening weekend and they make their final estimates, it falls somewhere in the middle of that $35 to $60 million. Note how the Suicide Squad has now dropped to $28 million. That means that their projected range is now much smaller. 28 million is essentially the medium, right? It's the middle ground. It's the average of what their highest and lowest number is, meaning it's no longer projected to make between $35 and $60 million. It's probably more so projected to make between, $20 and $40 million or so, which is, again, a lot smaller than this. And then you take into account what that would mean for the long-range number. And this is a movie that is likely going to maybe make it to $100 million domestically, maybe make it a little past $100 million domestically, but is not much expected to do much else. That's not very good. For a film that cost almost $200 million, you all know this because I've talked about this at length with Jungle Cruise and all the other Disney releases that have come out in the last year and a half. All of them costing over $200 million. When you then add on top of that marketing cost, those films have all been massive $100+ million bust because they've not been able to make that crazy amount of money back. The Suicide Squad costing that much money, being a rated R film also, and that's not always going to be a handicap, by the way, because just go ahead and look to Joker. Joker, released in 2019, cost only $55 million. And again, that's the key. The cost of the movie has a huge impact on profitability. That movie only cost $55 million and yet was able to make $1 billion worldwide, meaning it was one of the most profitable films that came out in that year, if not the most profitable rated R film of all time. So anyone going to argue, oh, it's a rated R movie, so not everyone's going to be able to go watch it. It's not a valid excuse. Since we now have a film like Joker in the history books, we know that people and adults are going to be able to be driven to a movie if the film actually looks good, if the film actually looks appealing, if the film actually looks like it's going to be entertaining. And seeing how dark the Joker is in comparison to the Suicide Squad, which, if you look at the promotional materials, looks like it could and should be a lot of fun. To someone like me, I look at it and I'm like, okay, this just looks like more crap CGI digital noise nonsense. That's just the way that it's perceived for me. And it looks like that is going to be the way that some, even hardcore DCEU fans are going to feel, with, again, the example being Lethal Lightning, who was a huge DC fan and hated this film. And in fact, I want to say he even mentioned at one point that he prefers the theatrical release of the 2016 Suicide Squad film, which, if you've seen that movie, is saying a lot. It's saying a lot. So this is a film that's going to be divisive for fans. How is it then going to be for people who are not fans? Maybe people who are normies. Maybe the normies will actually have fun with it. They'll be able to sit back and say, oh, this is stupid fun. This is great. But then there's other people like me who are not really a part of that normie demographic who look at this film and all I see is, okay, I remember how bad the first Suicide Squad film. I remember just how bad almost every single DCE film has ever been. Yeah, James Gunn is a part of the project, but that doesn't automatically mean that it's going to be a good movie. There's tons of films where they have very talented people behind the projects that the films themselves end up just not being very good. It's not a guarantee that that's going to happen. And on top of that many of us also know, John Cena is in this film. John Cena is a very prominent role in this movie as well. And guess what? A lot of people have a big problem with John Cena because he essentially threw Taiwan under the bus trying to appease the Chinese Communist Party for his film Fast 9. He essentially was trying to appease to commies who kill people in order to try and save his movie in that country. It's just, those are the types of things that I think are going to impact this. So out of all the hardcore fans, you're going to have some kind of division. And again, I've already kind of laid out how I can see that already happening. Among the normies, yeah, you might be able to appease a lot of them, but how much is that really going to be, since a lot of those normies are probably also people that are terrified of COVID? And then you look to other people who are just a little bit more nuanced or know just a little bit more about the behind the scenes and the actors and the politics behind everything. And we're going to be like, no, this just seems like a turnoff. Why would I want to go to see this? So what you're left with is kind of a reasonable explanation as to why this number is plummeting. This projection is really plummeting. So obviously we won't know everything until the numbers actually come out. As you all know, I wait for us to have actual raw data before being able to make any official predictions. But if this number holds, and again, this is significantly less than what it was originally. I mean, some people are saying, oh, it's only about $7 million less. But remember, 35 million was the low estimate, meaning that the medium of this would have been somewhere north of $40 to $45 million. The fact that now the median is going to be somewhere around $28 million means that entire number has shifted. That entire range has shifted, meaning that the film is not going to make anywhere near $60 million if this number holds. And obviously, that is a big if. But this number was pretty accurate when it came to Jungle Cruise last week. And in fact, Jungle Cruise ended up making about 3 million or so more than what the projection was last weekend, which, remember, was still within that range. So if the number is going to be a lot lower like it is now, it could spell major problem for the Suicide Squad. Not to mention, and I think I've mentioned this previously, you have a movie that is not going to be able to have and not having a China release. So normally, these studios love to play, footsie with China. They love to play footsie with the communists in China, and they love to be able to say, look, our movie made over $100 million in China, all the while ignoring the fact that, yeah, we only get about $25 million per 100 million, but hey, it's all good. But it's not going to have that. So it has nothing then to be able to boost the number, and no one, it seems, is going to be going to see it in any capacity. Now, obviously, it's getting a release in Hong Kong, but that is not the entire body of China. And so it's going to be, I would say, a pretty precarious situation. Now that we know that the film cost $185 million to produce, early on, I would say it seems like this movie is going to be yet another flop, yet another underperforming film for DC. Anyway, what are y'all's thoughts about this? Let me know in the comment section below. Do you plan on watching The Suicide Squad? If so, are you going to go see it in theaters, watch it on HBO Max? Let me know that as well. If you like this video, make sure you smash that like button. Again, light up that fire button if you're watching on Odyssey. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my August Locals, Patreon, and Subscribe Star members. Starting off with my Locals crew: Cat's App, The Real It, D Sharp, Biffer the Hobbit, Robert Barnes, and Goblin Squatch. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on Locals. And now on to my Patreon members: Andrew Hoyle, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Dion, Don Bruno de la Mancha, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father. Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toone, Jonathan Carney, Lance, Laura, the Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Allen, Teresa Martin, Theodore Benden, Tina Bojan, and Tina B, the Empress of the Universe. Thank you very much for supporting me over on Patreon. And lastly, to my Subscribe Star peeps: Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, John B, Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK Man. Thank you all very much for supporting me on Subscribe Star, and to everyone for supporting me on these platforms. Also, a shout out to all of my YouTube members. You get shouted out at the end of every single live stream. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and every video, please check out my Locals Patreon Subscribe Star. And you can go ahead and find those links in the top link of this description. You can find, it's called the Willow link, and it'll have a list to literally all of the social media platforms and all of the different ways that you can support the channel. If you join at the $1 level, you can actually get your name shouted out at the end of every single video and live stream. $5 level gives gives you that. Plus, you get access to exclusive giveaways of 4K titles. Right now, I've got tons of 4K Steelbooks to give away this month, including for Top Gun. I also have A Quiet Place Part 2. I have Snatch on 4K, the John Wick trilogy on 4K, and also I have a Sicario 4K disc as well, and a bunch of others that are going to be coming in this month too. So if you want to have access to any of those types of exclusive giveaways, join at the Army of Asgard level. At the $10 level, the Keeper of the Bifrost level, you get all of that, plus you get access to exclusive behind-the-scenes videos, including instant reactions when I go to see movies. I do quick little filmings of myself and talk about the films that I have seen and my instant reactions to that. You also get access to an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger once or twice a month, and you get to also ask us any question that you want. We put a Q&A post up, and you get to ask us whatever it is that you want to ask. So again, if that sounds cool to you, Keeper of the Bifrost level. And lastly, there is the Chosen of Valhalla level, where you get all of that stuff. Plus, in your first month as a Chosen of Valhalla member, you get a free t-shirt, your choice, ship it anywhere in the world, and also you get to once a month be featured on the OMB Reviews channel, and you get to talk with me. We usually chill out for 3 to 4 hours, and I ask everyone what they've been watching, what they want to talk about, what they want to promote, and it's always a really good time. And so if that sounds interesting to you, please consider joining. That is going to be on Subscribestar and on Patreon only, as Locals is just the Keeper of the Bifrost level. But anyway, thank you all very much for your time, for your support, and for listening to this shout-out video. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.